Hi, parents. Deacon John Wilson here, Education Enrichment Director of West Angeles Church, where our pastor is Charles E. Blake II. And we're excited to have your youth parents to get an opportunity to hear from an expert who's working with me now on college essays. She's wonderful. Brianna Bennett just started with me a few months ago or a couple months ago. But I think you'll see there's some great tips that she's going to give here about how to do their college essay. All right. I think if you listen closely, you'll see that she has a lot of insight to offer in this area that will be very helpful. Here's Brianna.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna Bennett, and I am a volunteer college counselor here with West Angeles Educational Enrichment Program. And I'll be talking to you all today about the top 5 tips to look for when reviewing essay responses, or my top 5 tips, and you can definitely use this to your advantage. So let's go ahead and get started. So my first tip is, did the student fully answer the prompt? So students should make sure that they're reading the prompt aloud before starting the response. This is super important because as you are writing your responses, you want to make sure that you fully understand the question that's being asked, all aspects of it, because you want to make sure that you're fully answering that prompt. Secondly, students should check great resources that they have out there, such as the UC Personal Insight Questions YouTube video, and read things to consider on the UC Personal Insight Questions page. This is super helpful because these are resources that the UC system is providing to you. It's like a cheat sheet in many ways. So you should make sure that you're looking through these resources before you even start writing, because then it'll give you a better idea of what you should write, and then tips on how to write it as well. And then also students should check out resources for essay prompts on the Common App page too. They actually have a list of all the prompts on their website. So that's a really great way to get an idea of what those prompts look like ahead of time. So that way you know that information before you even start writing the Common App responses. Secondly, is the response in the student's authentic voice? So you want to make sure that parents, guardians, teachers, counselors, and others, they shouldn't write personal insight responses for students. An admissions officer can definitely tell if the response is not from a high school senior, but if it's from another adult in their life. So you want to make sure that you're guiding your student through this process, but you're not actually the one who is writing the response. It's great to be a guider, but you don't write the response for the student. This goes into my point about students should write in their own voice instead of trying to emulate others' voices. It's very important to be authentic in these responses. This is one of the first life lessons on being your authentic self, because this is where you really will convey your message. If you're trying to emulate others' voices, then you're not being authentic. And the reader on the other side can tell that too. They can tell if you're not being authentic, if you're not using words that you're used to using. So it's super important to make sure that you're using your own voice when you are writing these responses. Next, is there structure to the response? So the responses shouldn't just be one lengthy paragraph. Sometimes we see that, and I think people think because there's only, a limited amount of words that you can put it all in one paragraph, but you have to remember that these are still like essay responses. So you want to make sure that there's an introduction paragraph, that there's body paragraphs, and then there's a conclusion to wrap it all up. Even if it's a limited amount of words, it's super important to make sure that there's structure, because then if there is structure, the reader will be able to understand it better as well. Secondly, you want to make sure that you're using shorter sentences instead of longer run-on sentences. Now, I must admit that I'm guilty of this in the past, and I still am guilty of it sometimes, but it's so much easier to have shorter, more direct sentences than to have long run-on complicated sentences, because you can often lose a reader when those sentences are long and run-on sentences rather than just having direct, straight to the point sentences, and you'll be able to convey your message better that way as well. My fourth tip is, does the response flow? So students should make sure that their paragraphs have transition sentences that allow the responses to flow. It should just be very clear when you're transitioning from the introduction to the body paragraphs, and lastly to the conclusion. It should be very clear on what you are doing there. Next, you want to make sure that's cohesive and it doesn't sound like different responses merged together. Now, I do understand that sometimes people want to use information from other essays that they've written, college essays that they've written. However, if you do that, you want to make sure that you are thinking of this current response as a whole brand new response, and that you're making sure that everything is very clear and cohesive in that response. Because what you don't want to happen is have two different essays merged together and it doesn't make any sense. And then my last tip here is the response grammatically sound? So students should make sure that the grammar and punctuation are to the best of their ability before submitting for review. Now, I do understand that, no one's perfect with grammar, or most of us aren't perfect with grammar or punctuation. However, there are great apps out there like Grammarly that you can use for free and installed on your computer that can help you figure out, like, if you could change something around to be more grammatically sound, or, put a period here versus a comma there. Like, they really do help you. So there's great resources out there that you can use before submitting it for review. And then also you want to make sure that the response, that you're reading the response aloud, just like you read the prompt aloud. Make sure it makes sense, because when you read it aloud, you'll catch any type of word that you might have missed, or anything that doesn't sound grammatically correct. You'll catch that too. So it's really important that once you are done writing, that you read it aloud to make sure that it makes sense. But those are my tips for you all today. It's really been great talking to you all, and I look forward to seeing you around. Take care.